Okay, we're going to call the council meeting to order. First order of business is mail delivery issues, and we have the Postmaster Aldana here to kind of give us an update on what's going on. And then we could kind of hold questions or comments until the end of that period. Go from there. And we also have a representative from Congressman Raskin's office. So if you guys want to stand up and introduce yourselves maybe to start, and then we can go into the... Good.
My name is Krista Burton. I work in Congressman Raskin's district office in Rockville.
Good evening. Hugo Aldana. I'm the postmaster of Bethesda. Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, great. So I guess, Mr. Aldana, you probably know a little bit of the questions and comments that have come in, but maybe if you could give us kind of a current lay of the land for staffing in Martin's Additions.
I'm going to
whatever.
so I won't.
But face.
I took over the office about 2 years ago, and I know it's a very tough office. It's not excuses. It's the largest office we have in the Capital District, and that includes Georgia, the Carolinas, Northern Virginia, Baltimore, D.C. So we're the largest office. It's always been, having a lot of issues. Lately, I was able to convince my boss to allow me to have another manager. One manager for 200 employees is very difficult to run. So I was able to get another manager to assist. I also have an extra supervisor now who's dealing with nothing but customer issues, concerns, and the training of the new employees. So I have given my phone number, my cell phone number, my email address. I believe probably all of you have it, and I'd rather take care of the problems that way. Because when I personally know what's going on, I can address it immediately. I have supervisors and managers in the office. They don't necessarily take care of the problems immediately, so that's the reason why I got involved myself. I'm not going to tell you that everything is perfect because it's not, but I can tell you I have seen at least improvement, and especially on those areas where we were having a lot of issues. I know this area, we have 4 carriers that are assigned to some of the streets here. To one of the routes that we were having a lot of issues with, it's what we call an auxiliary route. We don't have, or we didn't have, a carrier assigned to the route, but we assigned somebody, I believe, about 2 months ago. Maya is her name. She's a really good carrier. So she's handling these areas where we were having a lot of issues before. Speaking with the gentleman here, he had an issue. And I don't necessarily talk about this when we meet with residents, but I had to remove one of the employees because of what happened. And it seems like a couple of more employees took it seriously because they thought, that I was really not going to take this anymore. It gets to a point where there's only so much that I can accept when it comes to poor performance. And like I said, I've been working very hard with some of you, with Krista, and with the new manager and the new supervisor that we have. I know we've been having a lot of issues with misdelivery of mail, delivery of late mail. We go through approximately 50 new carriers every year at Westlake, at Bethesda, and it's very tough to make sure that they learn and get trained properly. But that's the reason why now we have 1 supervisor and we have 5 new certified new trainers that are actually taking care of the proper training for the carriers. Home mail, I know it's been another issue. Some of the carriers are not properly holding your mail when you put a hold order. So again, if I personally know, I can assure you it will be done properly. Maybe it shouldn't get to that point. I have another 200 employees in the office, but if you're having an issue, I'd rather take care of it myself. So again, my phone number is available, my email address, I can talk to you anytime. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about sorting the mail, which I think is the cause of the misdeliveries. Do the carriers sort their own mail for their own routes? Who sorts them? Why do I keep getting Delfield's mail on Chestnut Street?
They sort about 10% of the mail. Most of the mail comes already sequenced by machine. But still, the letter carriers are supposed to go through every single piece of mail and read the address and the name. And I know it doesn't happen all the time. I know they're probably rushing, but they only sort about 10% of the mail.
I got 3 pieces this week. This delivery.
What do you do? What street are you on?
One for the grocery store, one for just today, for, I live on Turner Lane, and this was for, Delaware Street. I mean,
That's, okay.
I got another one for Rockville last week.
Have you had a lot of issues like this before?
I have.
Because I haven't
Been going
gotten...
on continuously for
Okay.
Us, all of us.
a year.
No, I'm not particularly that route because there's
No,
only...
can I say something about
Sure.
that route? It was horrible for years, and suddenly we were getting our mail early, we were getting it on time, we were getting only our mail, and I accosted the new mailman I was here before, and he said he was new on the route. This was about a year ago, and this is Turner Lane. When he is off, our mail goes off. I've seen that. I know when he hasn't delivered. He is fabulous. I just wanted to be sure he doesn't get tarred with the same brush, because you're going to hear some horror stories here, I believe. I think his name is Lewis.
Mr. Hoggs, yes.
Is that right?
Lewis, yes.
Very reliable.
He's terrific. When he unfortunately he has days off, and when I always know when he's off, because then we get then I get Bernice's mail.
Yeah, I
because
get your
she's
mail.
on our street on our
Same address, different streets.
But Lewis is wonderful, so I just want to make sure that he doesn't fall through the cracks here. He's terrific.
And now that you mentioned Lewis, he's the oldest employee we have in Westlake. He's 71 years old.
Wow.
And he does better than a lot of the younger guys.
Perfect.
So but I'm going to address the replacement whenever he's not on the route.
The woman you said that's doing the route that's very good, is she,
Maya.
I don't know her name, is she relatively permanent?
Yes.
And, I mean, other than maybe her days off, the consistent?
We
'Cause
have
that's-
one consistent replacement. Her name is Tawana.
Okay.
She's an African-American lady.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I spoke with all of them last week and today. I'm going to them up in the office because I wanted to talk to them. I told them I was going to come over here and talk to you. And they told me the same thing. Sometimes we make mistakes, but
Well, yeah,
it's a replacement. But it's a replacement, but I will definitely speak with all the replacements.
No, I mean, I had done my complaining to the office, as Matt could probably tell you, but, no, consistently, assuming I'm getting my mail, has gotten to the mailbox for the last 3 weeks. But there was another one was thrown in the driveway, and thrown on the porch, and so on. So,
I understand. I apologize.
well, it's
We're
not
doing
your
the
fault,
best we
it's their
can.
fault.
Yeah, but it still is my responsibility. So I take responsibility for it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Aldana, would it be possible for us to get the names of who has what routes in the village? Maybe
Sure.
that would help. If we could do it by a map, and Matt can work with you on getting the...
As a matter of fact, I have a list of the streets with the carrier's name on it.
Oh, that would be, to know who the people are, so.
And they were okay with the fact I told them that I may give you the names
Okay.
of the carriers. There's 4 routes. I'm gonna let you have these. I had a couple of notes in there, but these are the routes and the names.
Okay.
Would you like a photocopy?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Maybe we can synthesize that and then make sure it goes out in the meeting minutes so that everybody has who has their route, and then also make sure that your contact information is also included in
Perfect.
the minutes so that it's all out and writing for everybody. Do you mind giving your phone number now just before
Sure.
we lose track?
It's 301. This is my cell phone. 301-892-0317.
Thank you.
Prefer calls or texts?
What was the last
What'd you say?
0317.
Prefer calls or texts.
Thank you.
If I'm driving, I will not answer.
Good.
Thank you. That's good. That is a good
Leave your
answer.
message.
Definitely, of course. Of course.
Thank you.
But I prefer that you send me an email because that way I have the information. You can call me. I'm not saying not to call me because you can, if you're frustrated, if you have an issue, give me a call. I will definitely answer as long as I can. If I get an email, it's even better because I can share it with my staff.
Okay, so then what's your email?
It's Hugo, Hugo .b.aldana@usps.gov. And I can assure you I will reply to your email shortly, very promptly. I usually respond very soon. Unless I'm driving.
Okay. Great.
Any other questions, any concerns?
I'm chair of our election committee, and last year we had a real problem delivering the election material packets. That half the neighborhood got it late because it sat in the post office undelivered for close to 3 weeks. And that was very time sensitive. So we have another election coming up every spring.
Okay.
And what should the committee do this year to make sure that that package gets mailed?
Please let me know. Whenever you're ready to mail it, let me know. Shoot me an email, a text, a phone call, and I will definitely take care of it.
It will be delivered on time?
Yes, ma'am. I can assure
It's our
you.
time.
I can assure you.
I'll hold you to it.
You do. I'll take care of it.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Anybody have anything else? One more back?
Yes, sir.
When we copy each other when we have a problem delivery, what's your process that you do to fix it? Or, you deal with the employee. When is it enough that you need to reassign or remove the terminate employee?
It's a little bit tough to tell you the way we do things. We're not allowed to even tell you that we remove somebody. But I usually keep a log of concerns, complaints, poor performance, attendance, and that's how we handle the employees. Obviously, there's a line or there's a level that they cannot go or that I will not accept. And lately, I talk to all the employees myself every single day. I get together all the employees, all the carriers, all the clerks, and that seems to be helping because before it was the supervisors who would talk to them. We're supposed to give them a service talk every morning. I'm doing that myself. I'm getting involved. So I do look at everybody's performance now, especially now that I know we've been having a lot of issues in this area.
So from us, what you need is the actual date that it was misread.
I would prefer that you contact me as soon as the issue happens, as soon as the problem happens, if you can, because that way I'll know who it is, who's responsible for the mistake. Okay, thank you.
Anything else? No, thank you very
You're
much,
welcome.
Mr.
Thank
Alfano.
you.
You're very
Thank you.
welcome. And again, I'm available anytime, an email, a text, a phone call.
Cool.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to ask you a question. Do you think that you see some seasonal issues that were coming out of the Christmas and Hanukkah and the holidays? When I think about the number of catalogs I got, I feel sorry for the poor carrier because they were massive. And of course, I threw out 9/10 of them. But do you expect that some of that reduction in catalogs should help reduce some of the problems that we're seeing? The reduction in volume?
The only thing that will help us with will be the late delivery. Obviously, the less mail we have, the shorter time the carrier is going to spend on the street. One thing I wanted to touch, and I'm glad you said, I know I've gotten a lot of phone calls telling me, well, it's snow, but it's clean. My mail is not here at 7 o'clock. It gets a little bit difficult for the letter carrier to walk in the snow, especially ice. So what I would ask is make sure that you clear the pathway for the carrier to reach your mailbox. Because every time we have a snowstorm, ice storm, we do have a lot of injuries. Letter carriers falling because of the snow. Sometimes you can't see with the eyes. So that's one of the issues that actually they told me today. And let me take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Another issue that I really would like help with is if you have a dog, please allow the letter carrier to leave the area for you to open the door. Because we have an average of 4 to 5 dog bites every week.
Every week.
Every week. And it's gotten, I have a special person now that is actually, who's gotten involved with safety and specifically with dog bites. And it happens most of the time is the letter carrier puts the mail in the, in the mailbox, leaves, the customer comes, opens the door to retrieve the mail, and the dog just comes out and bites the letter carrier. Most of the accidents that we have, we call them accidents. That the letter carrier is back to work the day after or a couple of days later. But we've had, since I've been here in Westlake at Bethesda, we have 3 instances where the dog actually bit the carrier on the face. And it was traumatic, it was tragic, but that's one thing that I would ask, to disseminate the information to the residents. That's been one of the biggest issues that we've had. But other than that, thank you all for your assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Oh, we look sorry.
Yes, sir.
I know it's, work in the federal government, it's hard to get employees. How can the congressman's office help? Is there anything that they can do?
Well, right now we're actually getting plenty of applicants. Not all of them pass the test, not all of them pass the screening, the background drug test. So I'm interviewing probably every 3 months about 30 to 40 employees. Out of those 30 or 40, maybe 10 will make it. And out of those 10, after the training, maybe 2 or 3 will stay. It's very tough. And we're spending a lot of money training these employees, and most of the time they don't get to stay. Carrying mail is not for everybody. It's not an easy job. It's not. I was a carrier back in the days, 30 years ago, and it was tough then, and it's still tough now. So it's not made for everybody. So we are getting the help when it comes to employees. It's just very tough right now to retain the employees. So that's one of the reasons also why we have supervisors now specifically handling the training of the employees, the new applicants, so that we can retain them and, we can give you better service.
Thank you.
Can I just ask how the dog bite issue is handled? I mean, maybe the punishment to the owner or the dog is not...
What we've been doing lately is I usually contact the customer. If I cannot get in touch with them, I send them a letter. We stop the delivery of the mail until I talk to the customer. At one point in time, we had a meeting with my boss and the district manager, and we thought about, calling the police and press charges, but we decided not to do that. I mean, this is just an accident. It's not that the resident actually wanted the dog to bite, the letter carrier. So that's how we handle it now. We don't want to cause any harm to you either. It's an accident, and we try to handle it the best possible way. But that's what we do right now. We stop the delivery of the mail to the house. We talk to the customer, and we get into an agreement. You're going to try not to let the dog out, or whatever the issue may be. But that's how we handle it right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
You're
you.
very welcome.
Krista, is there anything you want to say? Or you
And always contact me.
do you want to say
Do you
anything?
want to say anything else other than if you need my card, I'll leave a couple at the desk. And any other issues that you have, please contact us. At the Rockville office, we're happy to help.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
You all have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Welcome.
Okay, we can open up to resident comments. And when you have a comment, just please be sure to say your name and your street. Okay. Lauren.
Hi, Hi, I'm Lauren Beal. I'm on Delfield Street, dead end Delfield Street. Over the past few months, I've been deeper in code than I thought I would ever be because of some of the things that have come up in the area of my house. And one thing that I came across was that the land use article in the Maryland State Code seems to allow for our village to have more stringent codes than the county code on a number of issues. You know, obviously, I think I drew this to your attention around setbacks, but one thing that I also noticed was that we seem to be allowed to have more stringent stormwater management protocols than the county based on this Maryland State Code. And I know that in talking to other neighbors, it seems that stormwater management has been a kind of a persistent problem, particularly because of the topography here. And I just wanted to raise the possibility of whether the village might want to consider thinking through what it would look like to have these sort of more stringent stormwater management codes, since we seem to be allowed to do so by state law.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Frank?
I'm terribly sorry, I just couldn't hear this exchange. Have we stopped recording?
No, it's here.
There used to be a microphone here. But may I
So
ask
Lauren,
what this exchange
yes.
was?
Yeah, you were gonna go.
Sure. There's a mic right in there. Oh, is there a microphone there? Okay. I mean, I don't need to, I can face him. Just
Yeah, if you face him, I think he'll.
I do have some questions of my own, but
Sure.
Just to go on for a second. Does that help?
No.
Yeah, it's-
Should I speak just loudly?
Yes.
Yeah, it's. we need
I
to
was just
find
saying that I've been reviewing some of the local ordinances and some of the state law, and I realized that the state law actually allows the Village of Martin's Additions to have more stringent stormwater management codes than the county, and it's not something that the village has actually taken advantage of. We've set more stringent codes on a number of other things in terms of our building ordinances, but given the fact that there seem to be a lot of problems that come up around stormwater management because of our topography, I was suggesting that perhaps the council might consider thinking through what it would look like to set some more stringent stormwater management codes.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Thank you very much.
Well, can I address that just for a minute?
May I ask, number one, the main reason for my coming this evening is to try to pay a small tribute to the passing of Dan Gardner on the 21st of December. Dan was a very valued citizen of the village of Martin's Additions. We saw him walk through the village. He was intimately acquainted with it. He was our top tree man for a long time. And in those dark days, a long time ago, when I was on the elections committee, it was the Elections and Ethics Committee at the time, Dan helped us out on a couple of elections where it looked like there were going to be some issues or where there was some anticipated problem with regard to voting and things like that. I am sorry to see that the first notice of that sort of thing appeared in the Washington Post just last week. I would have thought that our newsletter might have contained a somewhat more opulent tribute to that man who was such a valued citizen here. As I said, this is the main reason for my coming. But once I had a chance to look at the agenda tonight, I noticed that there are several topics that interest me a great deal. And I was wondering, we have 5 minutes set aside for comments by residents. Will it be possible to participate or ask questions or participate in some of these topics that are coming up?
We're going to try and keep the comments.
sorry, I can't do it.
We're going to try and do the comments. We have 5 minutes set aside now, but we're running ahead of time. So if there are comments you want to give us now, please go ahead, and then we have time for comments later at the end of the meeting. So resident comments bookmark or bookend the council meeting.
Well, I don't want to prevent anyone else from speaking till this 5-minute period.
It's okay. We have time, Frank. This is your time.
First of all, I must say I challenge the whole idea of a meeting once a month where the residents are permitted comments for 5 minutes at the beginning of the meeting, and then if they sit through the whole business of going on, then they might also be allowed to comment at the end of the meeting. I think it might be a little bit more respectful to the residents if something like a 20-minute period were allotted for this topic. And if the answer is, well, people don't come to meetings, well, there may be cause and effect for that sort of thing. And there's nothing that ever says you have to sit for 15 minutes silently. If there are no comments, you can move on to the next topic. And I would like to suggest that the council adopt a practice of allowing for much more time at the beginning of the meetings, and then perhaps additional time at the end if that is necessary. I leave that for your consideration.
Sure.
I give out-
I just wanted to address that really quickly because I'm sorry if you did feel like you did not have enough time to speak. When I put together the agenda, to be honest, it was just to try to set a guess of how long each would go. Some of the meetings it goes longer for resident comments, and in almost every circumstance that I've seen that we've been here, we've allowed residents to comment for longer than 5 minutes. Sometimes there are no resident comments, so I would say when the agenda goes out, don't take it as gospel, the times that are set up. We don't.
Why don't you kind of, I mean, these agendas are read by some people, I'm not sure how many. I have trouble reading them on the computer. That's why I picked up a copy this evening. But it certainly doesn't encourage people to come if they think that they have to come here, speak real fast, and that's the end of it.
Sure.
So perhaps for cosmetic as well as substantive reasons, you might want to change that the next time you put one of these things together.
We don't even need
Great,
time.
thank you.
Right.
It's a placeholder. Right.
I have another question, and maybe Ron Bolt can answer this one. And that is, I notice that they talk here about the village council may entertain a motion during the open meeting to close a portion of the meeting. Is that just a piece of boilerplate, or if it's intended to do that, shouldn't a topic be given to be shared with the residents as to what it is that deserves to be discussed in private? And which leads to another question. I haven't seen any minutes lately being published the way they used to be. They used to have recordings that were also published for the benefit of the village, and all of this has fallen by the side. Isn't there some kind of a requirement under the Open Meetings Act or some other aspect of Maryland legislation that would require that?
Okay, so let's take it in two parts. You can explain why the disclaimer's there at the top, and you can do it's on the website.
I'm sorry, I still
Okay, so Ron's going to answer the first part of Frank's question, and then Matt will answer the second part to show where the minutes and the recordings are.
Yeah, Frank, the answer to your questions is yes, on all accounts. This is boilerplate. The Open Meetings Act was recently amended to require the agenda to reflect whether or not the council will go into closed session. Because we don't always know whether we are going to enter closed session, we leave that warning there as boilerplate. But if we ever know for certain that we're going to enter closed session, more detail will be put in that notice, and we will identify the specific exception that we will be applying and the subject matter of the closed session. There's no closed session proposed for tonight, so we have only the boilerplate language on the agenda.
Okay. Matt, do you want to address minutes and recordings?
So the minutes are posted on the website. I can send you a link after the meeting tonight if you'd like to them. As far as recordings go, they have fallen by the wayside the last 2 meetings. That's a software issue, so I'm just trying to figure that out. We had a virus on one of our computers, so unfortunately the software that we used to record it and turn it into the type of file that we uploaded before was lost. We have the recordings. We will publish them. It's just a software issue at the moment.
Well, I hope the software issue can be solved fairly easily, because one does learn quite a bit from these things if one can hear properly that the recordings are good. And I urge you very, very strongly to resume that as soon as possible. As far as the minutes are concerned, I realize that they may be available on the website, but it would seem to me that as an item of news, they should have individual publication. They're just as important publishing that, let's say, the office is closed early, or that there's a fund for the garbage men, or something like that. And I think we ought to put this in the proper perspective, publish it by itself for the benefit of the residents.
Have we stopped emailing? I mean, I know that we used to email when they were posted. The minutes have been posted here. Do we need to make sure we're still practicing that?
Yeah. I'll go back to sending individual emails related to that. At the moment, we were just doing them on the newsletter.
Okay. So Frank, they'll be in 2 places going forward. When they're posted on the website, Matt will send out an email to everyone saying, the minutes have been posted, here's the link. They're also included as a link in the newsletter that comes out once a month. So they'll be in 2 places. There will be 2 notices in addition to them being on the website in perpetuity.
Why don't you include them in the newsletter?
They are included in the newsletter. They are. There's a link to them included in the newsletter.
I mean the minutes themselves. I mean, instead of going hunting around where they might be on the website.
Do you receive the newsletter on paper? Is that...
Well, I personally like to have stuff on paper, but I'm talking about just publicizing it so people can see it. But, here we are on the 21st of January, and I think the last time minutes were posted were, I don't know, in September or October.
No, I think we've got minutes.
We have the draft minutes at least up till November, and there was no December meeting, so that might be where the confusion comes, that there was no December minutes.
I mean, there are some residents here who want to be informed, and I think they ought to be taken account of.
Okay, thank you.
Now, getting on to the substantive stuff, you say that we can't contribute, or if you don't want to use the word contribute, we can't ask questions or participate when some of these topics come up, but we can say something at the end. I obviously can't comment in advance on what the committee updates are, but they are committees that are quite important, elections, ethics, and others. And it would seem to me that there might be questions coming up as these reports are presented that can legitimately be asked and should be answered during the discussion. So I ask that this be made possible within reason, of course, but the idea that to sit here until 9 o'clock and at that point say, well, at 8:17, candidate X or Chairman Y said this, and so on and so forth, is asking an awful lot. And I think the proper thing to do is to take care of the matter as it comes up, where it will probably take a minute or two to resolve, instead of heavens knows what happens later on. That's number one. Number two, I was most concerned when I saw that at 8:30 p.m. there is to be a discussion on charter amendment recommendations. I'd be curious to know who made the recommendations, when they were made, have they been shared at all with the community, and how come this suddenly comes up cold in an agenda which the place is by and large a boilerplate. I think, again, this is a time where some intervention and questions and what have you by members of the audience would be not only appropriate, but actually something that could very definitely be granted.
If that were a motion, I would second what you just said.
Thank you. Anybody else? Before Keith does the weather report.
I have something I'd like to ask.
Name and address.
Let me just...
Your name and their street address?
Gene Sperling, Shepherd Street.
Thank you.
So if I understand correctly, if we have questions about the agenda item, on the charter amendments, we can't bring those up at the time.
We're going to try and go through them if there are questions you have now.
I'm going to make a statement then. I would encourage the council to give serious consideration to holding a public hearing specifically on the issue of the charter amendments.
Okay.
And actually allow for, when you have a public hearing, you'll find people have got some good comments and good suggestions about that would then result in the resolutions being altered because of that public hearing. So I'd like very much to encourage the council to do that. I have some issues with a number of the changes and some of the wording. I think we've got to be very, very respectful of our charter. It is our Constitution. It's a reflection of our history, and I think it needs to be treated with kid gloves and with respect. There are some of the things I wanted to raise as questions. I don't want to wait until the end, so I'm going to just throw them out there so that maybe these are things that Matt might want to address or think about. I noticed we've got a WSSC sewer renovation project that the WSSC is coming to Chevy Chase Elementary to make a presentation. And I know we've had our streets done. My question is, you mentioned that the streets that were already repaved aren't going to get sewer work. Okay, my question is, do they need to have the sewer work? And are we being sure that we're not foregoing the sewer work, which is extremely expensive, very disruptive, just to save the macadam that was laid down last spring?
Yeah.
And are we going to have representation of the elected officials from this town over at that meeting? I intend to go, but I'm not an elected official, so...
Neither am I.
Well,
for the record.
Elected official and staff to attend that meeting.
Sure. So the WSSC work is issued by WSSC. So the streets that the work is being done, they are old sewer lines that need to be repaired. And those were the streets that have been identified. And if you want, you probably already know it, but for the record, there is a site on WSSC's website that shows all of the anticipated work that they have that's on their docket.
But it's really important that the community see that, and that we're not covering up, we're not leaving asphalt unturned.
Sure.
Because we didn't know about it.
Right, yeah, and yes. So, and then to answer your second question, yes, I will be at that meeting.
And as an elected official?
Yeah, but the reason some of the streets were left unpaved because we knew they were going to be dug up. The streets that were paved have already been dug up and they're finished. So unless there's something
WSSC might have pulled a fast one. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Just don't count on it.
Yeah. Well, no, that
All right.
fair point. But before we did any of the work on the streets that we did do, we got certified letters from WSSC saying they had no planned work on those streets. So
it's reality is sometimes not what they say it is.
Yeah, I mean, I can't promise,
No, I just want to make sure that
what they decide
we're
internally.
aware of that.
Yeah.
The other question I have is about street signs. I noticed that in your minutes that you're going to replace them all, and they don't look like they need to be replaced to me.
Yeah.
So are you actually replacing them for need because they're rusty and dusty? They don't look rusty and dusty to me, but what's the motivation behind replacing?
So Joe Coutreau has already gone around the village, evaluated all the signs, and he has like a green, yellow, red system to say good to go.
Okay,
starting
so
to get.
It's not that you're replacing them.
Exactly.
All,
Yes. Right. Exactly.
Okay. The only other thing is I would urge you to upload your meeting packages sooner onto the website. I don't think it was uploaded until today.
Yeah, yesterday. Yeah.
It's not good. I mean, I think citizens following up with what Frank has said need earlier notice than that. And then I'll stick around and I guess make comments if I need to at the end. Thank you very much for this opportunity to make comments.
Bernice, you had your hand up?
No, just to follow up with something Gene said, but, and that was addressing about marks on the street, or when there's some marks along Taylor Street. There was an engineer parked, and then there's some markers hit the ground, and I think there's some orange.
That might be WSSC.
We have a nice new street.
Yeah.
Beware of those.
Yeah.
Ben.
Hi. Ben Dunn for Taylor Street. Simple request. Can you guys give more advance notice when you're doing routine blockages of parking spots? Every time I leave town, if you guys put up a sign right in front of my car, my wife has to scramble for the key. I think you guys might be stalking me, but it's for routine stuff like removing a stump.
Okay.
Like this is simple stuff, probably planned out a couple weeks in advance. You can put it up, more than 8 hours before.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Or maybe just an email. So Ben asked for more advance notice when we might need to block the streets, so stump removal or things that we know, just to give residents a bit more of a heads up.
Would you like to move up?
There's space here.
Here you go. I'm not sure that will help.
I'll make you pay.
May I suggest that people speaking go to the podium and sort of face this way and the council at the same time instead of standing here like I am?
Okay.
I'm trying to shout so everybody can hear it, but I think, and we have the microphone, and this whole thing is supposed to be recorded all the time, and so that people can listen later on. And people standing back here and speaking and not using the microphone, all of this that's supposed to be part of what comes back to us is not coming back to us in the way you intend it to be. So if you can sort of ask people when they stand, go over there and speak to the crowd, speak to you all at the same time. Thank you.
And get the microphone
Thank you, Lynn.
speakers up and working.
All right. Frank?
Yeah. I don't want to monopolize this, but I was very interested to hear what the postmaster had to say. And I would like to associate myself with Sally Moran's comment about our mailman. And I, at the same time, want to say that I do a fair amount of walking in this village. And I've been shocked, quite frankly, that even though there wasn't much of a snowfall, how few of the sidewalks and stairways and walkways to the houses were cleared. Probably would have taken 15 minutes for the broom to do most of them. But those things are slippery and pedestrians walk on them and male people walk on them. So perhaps it wouldn't be a bad idea to keep them in mind when you're having a morning cup of coffee. And it might also be a good idea if people got to know who the mailmen were. I'm sure Sally knows his name, and I know ours. And I would like to ask that the office put out a notice reminding people of their obligations to clean their sidewalks and recommend at the same time that they also do their walkways and especially steps for male people, contractors and others who have business at those houses. Thank you.
Yes, Sally?
Just sort of as a follow-up to that, I noticed when I was walking my granddaughter today, I think the new people in the village need to be reminded that there is a village law that you have to shovel your sidewalks. I think there are 5 houses along Turner that are not shoveled, and it's all people who have just moved in.
Okay.
Maybe you could remind them.
Yeah, I think it'd be good actually to tie some of the discussion from the mail from Mr. Aldana into the reminders of dog and code clean sidewalks. Maybe also when we send out notes about Rolling Acres or whoever's doing it now coming through, that we also remind residents and it's your responsibility to, so in that same email, hey, look out for the trucks. You guys should also be doing your piece now too.
Good idea.
Okay. Anything else? Keith, you got warmer weather?
Yes.
I don't want to get booed out of here. But before that happens, let me just promise everyone that much warmer weather is on the way to stay. And I'm predicting that temperatures in February are going to be above normal. And you know what? There's been more snow in northern Florida and some places in northern Florida like Tallahassee than we've had here all winter. So I got relief on the way for everybody, and this weekend is going to be especially nice.
Yes.
55 to 60.
Nice.
All right.
Sounds lovely.
Enjoy a preview of spring.
All right. Anything else? Okay. We had, just so everybody knows, we had about 25 minutes of resident comments during that period. So appreciate all of it, and it's great. All right. So committee updates. Marty, Lauren, you want to fight over who goes first?
An oral report.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mulder.
We have a wonderful committee, and we have, I hope, from the council, an appointment of an additional committee member, Susan Post.
Yes.
Is that being accomplished?
We will do it this evening. If you would like us to do it while you're doing your update, we can do it then, or we can do it after.
I would like to welcome Susan Post to the election committee, so please do that.
Could you please explain that we had a departure, and that so we're filling it, and it will be filled?
Filling a vacancy. Susan kindly volunteered. The committee would be thrilled to have her join us.
Okay. So Ron, what do I need?
We need a motion to appoint, and the term will be
through the end of
the
fiscal
existing
year.
term that is being filled through vacancy, which is through the end of the fiscal year.
All right, so I move that we appoint Susan Post to the election committee. Is there a second?
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Nope.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Welcome, Susan. We have also given the council back in the fall some updated and cleaned up election rules and procedures, which were discussed in the October, I think, November meeting. And we would like to see those adopted officially, if not tonight, then soon, because one of the things we did was lengthen the timelines for the nominations process, in part because of mail delivery problems. And we would like to have that in place by February. Okay. So if you could council to do that. We also, one piece of that was in the charter amendment. One of the charter amendments was to 602, which specifies that nominations must be submitted in writing 30 days prior to the election, and we had asked the council to please, in the charter, change that to an open-ended date, because we'd like 45 days. You don't need to say 45 days in the charter, you just need to say whatever the election procedures rules say, which will be says 45 days. So if you would fix that consistency in the charter. And thank you for acting on both of those pieces. And the last piece is really personal. Thank you for the trash can on Thornapple Street. People are calling it the Marty Memorial Trash Can. And I'm really honored because we've needed a trash can there for a long time. And you put it on a nice concrete base too. That's not election committee, that's just personal. Thank you for the trash can. That's it.
All right, thank you.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you all. We will, by the way, be working with Lauren's committee to do a kickoff event.
That's right.
So I'm going to let Lauren announce that.
All right.
Since I sit on the elections committee as well, we have good crossover communication.
It's very helpful.
Okay, so update from the Community Engagement Committee. We've had a bit of a hiatus in terms of our meetings since Halloween. I think everyone was very excited by Halloween, and we had a great post-mortem on Halloween, so we've got a lot of thoughts about the future and have an intention to set up a short survey that we send out to the neighborhood so that we can get a sense of do people like having it on Halloween? Would they rather have it the weekend before Halloween? It seems like there's a split. It might be that there's a split in opinion that's like straight down the middle. People who came had a great time. People who didn't come were sad they couldn't come. So we're going to have to figure that out, something to look forward to. I'm really happy to say that we've gotten the street captains up and running. Matt actually used the street captains and is in the process of using them to disseminate the directory update information. And you know, we're still sort of getting the wheels turning on that. But I know Alyssa, who is one of the co-chairs and street captain, you know, comes now and has a process for welcoming new residents. Perhaps if there's a sheet that you all would like to create about, you know, don't forget that it's your responsibility to shovel your sidewalks or any kinds of little tips like that. That's certainly something we could include in a welcome bag as a kind of a reinforcement, but just a thought. We have also talked about sort of in this sort of inaugural year, maybe picking kind of 5 events that sort of create a bit of a consistent calendar. There are already some great events on the calendar, so we're not talking about messing with those, but rather adding a couple more that are well spaced. One thought is we seem to have a sizable credit still at La Ferme from the wine tasting, and so there have been some discussions about possibly having one of the events be just a February kind of gathering at La Ferme where we can spend down some of that credit that we have. The May sidewalk party, along with the election. 4th of July, we've had conversations about possibly around Labor Day doing like a movie at Shepherd Park, which I think could be really fun, and getting food trucks or possibly just a potluck picnic, and then we're back to Halloween again. And the other thing that we have been discussing is trying to support Paula Goldberg's work in getting the Tree City USA certification back for, I don't know if we're getting it back or if we're just maintaining it, but which requires that we have an Arbor Day event. So that seems like a very easy thing to pull together, and we're looking forward to doing that in support of the overall village goals.
That's great. Thank you.
When is Arbor Day?
April 22nd.
Yes.
April.
Though it does not have to apparently
On that day.
Yes, apparently we don't necessarily have to, it doesn't have to be an Arbor Day event, it has to be a tree
event.
celebration.
Okay.
And so we had sort of hoped we might be able to pull something together just like with the tree plantings in the fall, apple cider or something. We're going to make something happen that we can put on our application.
Okay.
I don't know what it will be yet. Stay tuned. Any questions? Yes.
You mentioned the credit at La Ferme.
Yes.
Is it actually a credit or is it wine that's sitting there?
Both.
It's both. Both.
How much does it amount to?
$2,500 or so.
Ish.
That's a combination of
No, that's the credit
That's
and
just
the wine
the credit.
is separate.
And then we have probably 50 or so bottles of wine.
Which means that there's, I think, an opportunity potentially to have maybe a standing thing that we work out, and I think that it could be that we have once a month there's a bit of a sort of happy hour gathering, something like that. I think that, if we've got the credit there, let's make sure we spend it down in a way that...
So there are definitely, I think Matt has a few things that he wanted to connect with you about options for that, so that we take kind of some of the comments that you've received and the rest of the committee has received, and then work it into, okay, is La Ferme going to accommodate some of those things, or is it not going to accommodate some of the things that we may be missing or not? So, great. Okay.
As a resident, next time I look firm, can I put it on the village?
It's restaurant week this week, man. Lunch and dinner. There you go. All right, so the next thing on the agenda is...
Did Todd no,
Oh, I'm
you're
sorry.
just here as a resident, not as the ethics committee chair.
Unless you need me to.
Hopefully
I have a question for the ethics committee. And so if he doesn't have a report, does it mean I can't ask the question? I'll save my question to the end of the meeting and make you sit here with me, okay? No, you I got a question for the ethics.
Okay.
You could report that Dean has a question.
That's right. There you go. All right, so the next thing is minutes for November the 16th. I think that we did go through these online and they were approved, so we're doing this for the record. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I will move to approve the minutes from last November that we have reviewed online. So I will move to approve those.
Okay. Second. Thanks for the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so the minutes have been approved. All right, on to the building administrator's report.
Just a couple items to go over. Just to refresh your memory and give you an update at 3405 and 3407 Thornapple. 3407 is the vacant lot where the old house was. 3405 is where the new house is. Montgomery County has released their building permit for 3405, the new house, and I recommended to Matt that the village also release their permit for the building permit.
Which means that the dumpster and everything is gone, and it's no, okay.
Remove the dumpster and the temporary toilet, so that's all out of the way.
Okay.
I have, last week I met with the Montgomery County Sediment Control Inspector, and we reviewed the work that was done on both 3405 and 3407. There's an outstanding sediment control permit, which the county will not release until several things are done. First of all, they have graded beyond the limits of what was shown in the sediment control plan.
True.
So once the weather permits, he's going to instruct them to remove the excess dirt to put it back to where the plant, what the original ground was. There's a difference in elevation between the new lot at 3407 and the property next door, so that's got to be lowered so that they're back to original grade. Until that's done, he won't release the sediment control permit for that lot. And also, he said he might hold on to it because it might be used for the new house if they ever come in with a building permit and sediment control permit for the new house on 3407. So I recommended to Matt that the village retain their performance bond until four things are accomplished. One, that the grading is completed, or put back to the way it was on the 3407. That the driveway, the old driveway from 3407 be removed. There's several sections of damaged curb along Thornapple that need to be replaced, and the sediment control inspector releases her permit on 3407 and 05. Okay.
So I understand all of the damage needs to be repaired, etc., but since we don't have something currently on the books for sediment control, Ron, can we hold on to that without pursuant to the county clearing the sediment issues? Or maybe you could research that and make sure that we're on the right side of that.
So you're suggesting that since the village has no sediment control authority, that we can't use that as a
I want to make
barrier
sure that we
to-
get everything that we have the authority to get fixed, and that we are on very solid ground when it comes to holding on to the bond for something that we don't regulate currently.
But it would be reasonable to hold the bond until the project is complete, because we wouldn't want to release the bond when work is still ongoing, because damage could occur, and we don't want to give up the bond before all the work is done.
And they're
As
gonna
long
have
as
to
you're
bring
good
more
with it.
equipment in to do all the grading, so it's going to be, could be damage to the right of way.
As long as you're good with it, and the fact that it's two subdivided lots now. Because we want to make sure we got all that buttoned up. Okay, great.
The other item is that the State Highway Administration has told me that sometime in January, they're going to be making improvements to the northeast corner of Brookville and Bradley. Hasn't taken place yet, so it's on my list to call them next Monday to find out where it is.
It's like an ice skating
It's
rink
supposed to be
there.
coming up soon.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Anybody have any questions on the report? You're practicing your twirls? Hey, man. All right, so the next thing on the agenda, financial matters. Arthur.
Right. For the financial matters this week, I wanted to address the question of whether it would behoove us, if it would be in our interest, to reduce the property tax rate back to the level it was in 2010. 2011 when it was raised. We have been discussing this, whether the income tax, our state income tax, is high enough now, whether our capital expenditures are mostly in hand, any surprises there. And the council asked me to review our finances to see whether we're in a position now to reduce the tax rate, the property tax rate. Well, in the report that is, I think was made part of the package, do the residents, was this made part of the residents package? Right. The short answer is it's a no-brainer. When you look at...
To be clear, we're not making any decisions on
We're not
this
making
tonight.
decisions right now. But the main point is that if we look at our total revenues, minus the property tax, for the last several years, we have a surplus of more than $300,000. So that says that all of our revenues minus the property tax are generating a substantial surplus. So that reducing the property tax right now would not put us into any financial harm or difficulty. If we come into another recession in the next 2 or 3 years, and recessions always occur, I'm an economist and I know that I can never predict one, but I can assure you with almost 100% certainty that there will be one. We may have to return to this. And the whole point of having the property tax on the books at a very low level was to make it relatively easy to increase in a time of emergency. And that emergency occurred in 2010 and 11. We took advantage of that. We increased the property tax. Now, just to remind you, before increasing, property taxes were only 3% of our total revenue. In the year that we increased it, went up to 24%, and it's now been around 15% lately. So that I think that we do have the sufficient resources from other sources at the moment to reduce the property tax down to about the rate that it was in the past.
Can you give us those rates, please?
You know, they're low. I don't.
What is the tax?
I don't have it on hand. The exact tax
Yes,
rate.
that's what we're at right now. Yes.
And what it was raised to that from?
We didn't raise it this year.
No, I know.
Originally, back in 2010.
There was no. The problem with that report was there were no rates.
I deliberately didn't put them in because I thought it would be kind of eye-glazing.
I know. It wouldn't have been.
But I think the point of when it was the last meeting before I joined the council when it was raised, if you recall, amongst a lot of opposition within the community, a lot of discussion. The rate was calculated to generate the revenues that we wanted. So in a way, the rates followed the revenues. We decided what the revenues were needed and figured out what the rate was going to be to generate that.
What rate are you suggesting it be lowered to?
Essentially back to where we were back in 2010. Which was lower.
0.002 or something?
I don't have the number.
Okay, but the council does understand that the municipal duplication fee is based upon, or has been historically, or recently, based upon what revenues we're generating under our own power. I'm sure the attorney will tell you that. And so that what you have to look at before you reduce that rate is whether or not it's going to have impact on your revenue sharing. The other thing is the county is after us, as I'm sure you all know, and they don't like us seeing us not put in some effort to tax our own residents to pay for services that they then turn around and are told they have to pay for. But I'm sure you're all aware of that.
All right. Thanks, Arthur. So we need to have a motion to approve.
Any questions on that? Okay, thank you.
So I think this is just on the tax issue. It's the beginning of the conversation, and then we'll go through the normal budget process, and it will come up again later on this year. All right, so for the treasurer's report, can I get a motion to approve the month's treasurer's report?
I move to approve the treasurer's report.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, treasurer's report is approved. Ron Bolt, tell us about small cell tower legislation.
Sure. So I don't have a lengthy update for you, but you may have heard in the news that wireless providers like AT&T and such are seeking to get ahead of potential county and municipal legislation that may limit what small cell or wireless towers they may install in rights-of-way. So there is an effort at the federal and state level for helpful legislation to be adopted for these companies. The Maryland Municipal League has been following it closely and has reviewed the proposal submitted by these companies and is actually going to provide an update to all of us attorneys on February 8th. I'm going to plan to go to that because the MML is monitoring it, as well as several local attorneys, including Lynn Board from Gaithersburg. Most of my clients haven't asked me to jump into it, so I haven't done so. You may ask, what do these things look like? I've got some photos here that were provided by one of the providers.
These will be mounted on light posts on...
For the audience, if you'll pass these around as well.
I was hoping you drew these personally, freehand.
How tall are they? Take a look at the diagram. The diagram says that, or shows that, they're basically 6 cubic feet in volume boxes. I like to say they're less ugly than speed cameras, but similar in design. The first diagram shows one on top of a lamppost. The second shows 3 on a telephone pole, and the third is a freestanding small cell tower. Now, the reason this has become an issue is because currently some jurisdictions, including Montgomery County, through zoning authority, limit what cell phone or other towers can be placed in rights-of-way. So that's a key focus for these providers. They want preemptive legislation from the federal government or state government precluding local governments from prohibiting these in rights-of-way. So that's the fight that's going on right now. You may know that generally speaking, utility providers have a right under Maryland law, or what's known as a franchise, to operate within municipal governments because there is a public policy interest in allowing these companies to operate for the benefit of the public. And so we cannot prohibit them from operating in our jurisdiction, but we can impose reasonable regulations on them and require franchise fees and the like. So these companies are also seeking to limit what fees can be imposed on them.
So are they seeking statutory support from the federal government?
Yes.
Or are they seeking regulatory support?
Statutory. They're seeking preemptive legislation that would say a local government may not prohibit small cell phone towers in rights-of-way.
Let's make sure that Congressman Raskin's office and others know that this is an issue that we're interested in.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
I just ask that Matt make sure that Congressman Raskin's office know that this is an issue that we're interested in. If the companies are going to the federal legislators seeking legislation to achieve their goals, then we want to be a part of that conversation when it comes to our federal representatives. Okay. Sorry, Ron, go ahead.
No, that's my update. I can provide another update after hearing from MML.
When is the meeting, the next meeting you're going to, you said?
It's a meeting on February 8th.
Okay. All right, next thing is the discussion of the charter amendment recommendations. And Ron, before we go into the different amendments, if you could give a little bit of the history, because I think there were some questions raised earlier that we can remind folks of work that's been done over the past 2.5 years, I guess.
So in late 2015, the village retained an outside consultant to review the charter and code and make recommendations for improvement. The code was amended in response to those recommendations, and we're just getting around now to amending the charter.
Can you talk about
spurred perhaps by the elections committee that reminded us it's been an issue on their radar for a while, and so we took the opportunity to do a lot of amendments at once to the charter. Tonight is just an introduction of the recommendations. No action is being taken tonight. There would be a public hearing at the next monthly meeting. So residents will have an opportunity to comment tonight, but also there'll be a formal public hearing at the next meeting.
There will be or will?
There will. There will. And in the interim, anyone's welcome to submit written comments.
Which we've already received a couple.
Just, it will actually be at the March meeting that the hearing will be. Is that because we have to wait 30 days after introduction?
That's right. Thank you, Matt. Yeah.
I thought it was 40 days.
No, it's 30. Our charter currently provides that we cannot adopt any regulation or the like until at least 30 days after it's introduced, so we're applying that standard. After a charter amendment is adopted, it doesn't become effective for 50 days, and for 45 days we have to post it at the village hall and publish in a newspaper, so that's probably the 45 day that you're recalling, the time limit. And any charter amendment is subject to referendum during that 45-day period. So for that reason, we have a public hearing before we adopt anything. So the council has the opportunity of hearing what objections, if any, there may be.
You want to note that most of this is cleaning up language.
Yeah. I'll go through them, but as Arthur noted, most of it is housekeeping. We've identified certain things that need to be clarified. For example, Martin's Additions first started out as a special taxing district, which had bylaws. And there's a reference to bylaws in the existing charter. As a municipality, we no longer have bylaws. We have a code of ordinances. So we want to eliminate that reference. And there are a couple of other things like that we want to address, and an issue addressed by the elections committee. So with that, I'm happy to go through them one at a time, if you like. The first proposed amendment is to Section 101 of the Charter, and this was a recommendation that came through from the third-party consultant. The last sentence in Section 101 states that, upon ratification of the Charter, the Martin's Additions Special Taxing District will be abolished. Well, that sentence is no longer necessary because it has occurred. So this amendment would delete that sentence. That's no longer necessary. The next amendment, Section 301, the definition of resident. The definition of resident is important for elections because it defines who is a qualified voter. And an issue that has come up in years past is what does it mean to presently live in the village? Because currently the charter provides that a resident is one who presently lives in the village. And that's created ambiguity and confusion because, for example, the village has commonly allowed college students to vote, but college students do not presently live in the village if they're living temporarily in a dormitory at their university. And the issue, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, may have also come up with someone who was staying at hospice for maybe 3 months. They weren't presently in the village, but still considered the village their home, their domicile. So this amendment would change presently lives to presently is domiciled in Martin's Additions, and would add the phrase, and considers Martin's Additions to be the person's domicile and voting residence, including but not limited to students temporarily away at college or university. Mike Zielinski submitted a comment questioning whether this may be overly restrictive because it can be difficult to prove your domicile. So this might be one that the council wants to discuss now or in March.
Could I raise, is this a time to raise a question on this? In considering Mike Zielinski's comments, which seem to me fairly persuasive, I wonder if we could just leave the current language in the charter and adopt a policy, a village policy, that we interpret live in the way in which we want to interpret it, with this language that we are now suggesting for the charter to put into a policy,
Yes.
which would give clarity and direction to the election committee about who's and any other use that may come of that.
So yes, we could adopt a policy document or interpretive guidance, but unless we change the charter, the policy would be subject to challenge, or the application of the policy, because someone unhappy with the policy could argue that it is an incorrect interpretation of the charter. Because presently lives has a general if we apply the plain language and we give the plain language meaning, presently lives means presently lives. I think it might be hard to adopt an interpretive policy that says something different.
Even for a lawyer? I mean, come on. I'm just kidding.
Well, we can write something, but it would always be subject to challenge.
Okay, well, yeah.
And let me finish too on the intent behind use of domicile and voting residence. I borrowed language from the IRS. Generally speaking, someone has one domicile. You can't vote in both Maryland and Virginia elections. You have one voting residence. So do we, as a village, only want folks similarly voting in only one municipal election? If someone has a home in Alexandria that they spend half the year, should they be allowed to vote in Alexandria and Martin's Additions? As currently drafted, that would be prohibited, but it's something that the council can discuss.
I would argue that there's not necessarily a parallel between the state elections, where you get representation. If you live in a certain state, right, you have representatives, and so if you voted in multiple states, you'd have multiple representatives, and that's not right. The issues that we deal with within the village are not like that, and so if a person owns 2 homes, why wouldn't they be able to vote on the issues relating to those 2 separate homes, or other instances?
Yeah, I don't care.
So I think if I'm hearing everybody correct, the goal is not something people disagree with, council members, that if there's a student, if there's someone who's temporarily living outside of the village but they're still domiciled here, that we want them to be able to vote in our elections. The concern that Mike raised might have to do with the language. So maybe we look at other options for language that would address the problem so that we don't have the challenge issue of us just adopting a policy, but we address the concern that Mike raises here. And I know that would delay this conversation a little bit on this amendment, but I think it's something worth worth reviewing. Does anybody else?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
And does the council generally agree?
Yeah.
You don't mind if someone votes in more than one jurisdiction?
No, I agree.
Two municipal
Can I ask
elections.
a question?
This is not the time for resident comment.
Oh, okay, excuse me. I'll wait for the public hearing. Thank you.
All right, Ron, next.
Section 405, this section addresses in part when a council vote is necessary for the expenditure of funds, and currently there's a threshold of $1,000, which hasn't changed since before 1983. And so the proposal would be to adjust it to $5,000 to account for inflation. I had also thought of, in order to prevent having to do this
Change it
again in another 20 years,
I agree.
we could add, or in such other amount that the council may set by ordinance, but if it's only a change every 10, 20 years, maybe it's not that important. Maybe you don't need to reserve that flexibility.
I'm all for reserving flexibility, so future councils don't have to make this unless there's
Yeah, I agree. I think making it flexible is always advisable, so people don't have to go through this again time soon.
Okay.
Section 406, this relates to meetings. As currently written, it says the council shall meet monthly on a date set out in the bylaws. We have no bylaws, so we're going to delete that reference to the bylaws and say shall meet monthly or at such other times as determined to be necessary. The latter language is already in there. And also there's a reference to Article 76A of the Annotated Code of Maryland. And as written, it says we shall only enter executive sessions as provided in that law. That Maryland Code section has been superseded, and so we would delete the outdated reference and just say Open Meetings Act instead, as amended. And we would change the word executive to closed, because the Open Meetings Compliance Board has said, although executive was used commonly in the past, it is synonymous with administrative, and you do not need to apply the Open Meetings Act for an administrative meeting. And so to be clear, it should say closed.
Okay.
Section 602, this is the provision regarding elections. Again, there's a reference to the bylaws that would be deleted. And it currently provides that written nominations for council should be submitted to the council, and instead we would change it to elections committee to remove the council from the duty of receiving nominations, just to avoid any appearance of impropriety. And of course, the elections committee would then put together the report and submit it to the council as to who the candidates are, so that Matt can produce the election notice.
Has the election committee reviewed this? I mean, I know we discussed this section with them in the past. Have they reviewed this draft?
Yes, most of these edits did come from the committee, the elections committee.
Okay.
We would also add in flexibility to allow nominations to be processed according to elections rules and procedures, because as currently written, the charter just says individuals may declare their candidacy or be nominated by another qualified voter. But that left an administrative gap because it wasn't clear how that could actually be done in practice. And so we would add a phrase, according to the election rules and procedures, and allow the election committee, with approval of the council, to adopt administrative rules for that purpose. And we would add a sentence that would say anonymous nominations shall not be accepted, to avoid a recurrence of what happened some years ago where someone anonymously nominated entire streets of people who didn't really want to be nominated, or attempted to nominate, I should say.
So the only thing on this, Marty's statement earlier about not having a 60-day prior and leaving that flexibility again. So I have two sides to that. I think it's important for us to be clear about the time frame. So can we set up a floor or a ceiling versus having an exact number here?
So hadn't gotten to that one yet. And then the final edit would be that we would delete the requirement that nominations be received in writing at least 30 days prior to the election, and add a phrase instead, by the deadlines set forth in the election rules and procedures, to allow more flexibility, because the Elections Committee reported, and I don't want to get it wrong, but at least 45 days would be preferable for the Elections Committee to do their work. 30 days is a little bit of a time crunch.
Okay. So I like just making sure that the final version of this reflects the comments that she made earlier, unless somebody else objects.
I just want to, Ray, this has nothing to do with these amendments, but the fact that we can have write-in nomination, write-in candidates, bypasses this entire process. A write-in candidate can be submitted anonymously, way beyond beyond the deadlines and so on. So we have this formal process set out, and then the other part of the formal process, a write-in that bypasses this entire system. Just to bring it to everyone.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Some jurisdictions have amended their charters to preclude or prohibit write-in candidacies.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Due to recent events.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Self-campaign.
Right. Yeah. Well, Section 701. This relates to check signing. The proposal would, and this came from the third-party consultant, there's a sentence in here that says, no council member shall sell supplies of any kind to Martin's Additions or contract in any manner with the council. And the recommendation was to delete that sentence because conflicts of interest are separately addressed in the code. And the sentence seemed a bit out of place in this provision, which deals with contractual authority and check signing.
And I believe our ethics committee concurred with that, removal of that from that section.
Yes, I believe so. And then secondly, we would add a sentence, all checks or other written methods of payment shall be signed by the treasurer and countersigned by one other council member. And the reason that is added is because a separate section of the charter, 403, currently provides that the treasurer signs checks, but the council may temporarily authorize other council members to sign and countersign checks. So the reference to countersigning there suggests checks are supposed to be countersigned. So we would add that express requirement in this section. And Arthur raised the question, does this mean only the treasurer must always sign? What if they're out of town? Well, if we read this section in combination with Section 404, no, because Section 404 of the Charter currently authorizes the council to temporarily designate someone else to sign checks.
But you and Susan have taught me that sections of the code should stand on their own. So I would say the same rules should apply, right, for the Charter. I don't want to add the by the treasurer here if that's not what we intend it to be.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you have to have a treasurer.
You have to have the treasurer,
treasurer
unless you're aware of that
travel.
other piece of the charter.
Well, that's why I
and then you
raised.
have to go back to it.
And then that raises the question, with the other says, authorized by the council, do we have to have a motion
yes,
by the council to say, I'm going to be out of town, you have the authority to now sign? Or is there some kind of blanket authority granted, which we have never adopted, that does that? So there's some questions here.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe we can move the check signing to 404
I like,
under the treasurer's duties,
Yeah, under treasurer's duties.
so that it would all be in one place.
Yeah.
I don't mind it being referred to here along with contractual authority. My concern is let's make it so it doesn't have to be the treasurer every time. And then make that clear in both places if it's going to appear in both places, but that it is also clear there needs to be 2 signatures.
Okay, well, from a policy,
council if
Any
needed.
council, right. You don't have to solve it now.
okay.
But
Well, I was just going to ask from a policy standpoint, do you always want the treasurer to sign checks
Normal-
if the treasurer is here?
Normally.
Because 404 does suggest that the treasurer is the one that maintains the books and has
Does
the
it make sense to say
primary.
if treasurer is available?
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, the treasurer could be, if we have a check that we need, the staff needs to be signed today, and we get, that stuff happens all the time, and the treasurer's not available, then if there's an administratively burdensome process to go through for the treasurer not to be the signatory, that's not helpful. I would say let's look at what the...
Yeah. Well, work on it. Ron, there was another phrase there, in the other section that you were referring to over on the other one, about signing paper documents.
The council may temporarily authorize other council members to sign and countersign checks to pay debts and obligations of Martin's Editions.
No, there was some other kind of document.
All checks or other written payment methods.
Other written payment methods. What about a credit card? If Matt buys something at Costco and signs a credit card, does that, it seems like that covers, that would include the a credit transaction of that sort.
Well, I don't think so. I don't think a credit card payment is a written form of payment, but...
Direct withdrawal.
But because you've raised the issue, we could,
Yeah, I'm wondering, this was 1985. Well, they did have credit cards in 1985.
Should it be one of those things we revisit?
Yeah. Of course, when the credit card statement comes in and
then we pay a check.
Yes.
Then you're paying it with a check.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you concerned about?
Yeah, whether that statement is too broad.
Okay.
Other forms
So why are
of
we,
payment.
all checks shall be signed? Why did you add the or written or other methods of payment?
Yeah, what are the other methods of payment? Money transfers? I don't know.
I don't think we have any other methods of payment, do we?
Maybe
Well,
we're
at
just
the
trying to be
time-
flexible.
I mean, yeah.
If there's a reason, Ron, tell us. How about that?
Yeah,
I don't know.
that one I don't remember from 2015.
What about from 1983?
That's right. All right, don't worry.
Okay.
Not right now. Not right
Okay.
now.
We don't have petty cash, so that wouldn't count.
No. Okay, but moving on. Okay, most of them are pretty cut and dry.
This is not nearly where it was in 2015.
No.
Section 902 governs surety bonds and who among the council and staff must post bonds. As currently written, it provides the chairman, treasurer, and all other officers or employees designated by or designated shall give bond, and that the premiums shall be paid by the council. Well, we don't want the council to have to pay the premiums. It should be paid by the village, so we're going to change council to village. And instead of saying just chairman and treasurer, we would change it to all council members and the village manager. Because everyone has the ability to sign checks, there's really no sense to bond only 2 out of the 5, we thought.
So I get
and Matt checked the premiums, and they're minuscule, as I recall. And so it makes sense to bond all council members.
So I understand bonding all council members. and the village manager. Why?
Because if there were to be theft, probably the village manager is in the best position to do so, being in the office every day. Nothing has nothing to do with you personally.
So can we say village staff? Because I think we've got, again, nothing personal. We've got staff, we've got contractors, etc., who are here.
Well, yeah, that's
And
fine.
how do we
but,
find staff?
But then every time you add a staff member, you'd have to bond them. And currently there's only 2.
Right.
Staff would include any independent contractors. But really you're concerned about who has access to the checkbook.
Okay. All right. I'll let it go.
Are we okay with village manager, or do we want to say assistant as well?
No, I'm fine.
Don't get any ideas, though.
14 minutes.
Okay, now what?
903, again, reference to the bylaws. So currently the charter provides that those seeking elected office or employment must make disclosures as set out in the bylaws. We have no bylaws, so that phrase would be deleted, and instead we would say, submit a conflicts of interest disclosure in a form recommended by the Ethics Committee and approved by the Council, which has been done. The Ethics Committee did come up with a proposed conflicts of interest disclosure that the Council approved, and so this amendment would just effectuate those changes.
Okay.
906 is just deleting an antiquated reference to a provision of the Maryland Code that no longer exists. We would change Article 23A to Maryland law. And that's it.
And were any of these not previously discussed? I know that we either had a meeting or a work session where we went through kind of all of the recommendations that had come from the third party, that came from you from years of being the village attorney. I feel like all of these have been discussed before. We're re-engaging now after a pause. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, that's right. At one point, the consultant actually came and presented their findings, and the council discussed those findings at 1 or 2 meetings. And the recommendations are being introduced now for public consumption.
You had your notebook of proposed changes.
But that was more for the code than the charter. I did have the comments on resident, because I had experienced those issues as they came up. And the bylaws, those came from my notes too. Right. That's right.
There were the general, I can't remember if the general administrative ones throughout, adding numbers, fixing VMA to village. Can we do that in a one miscellaneous?
So, no. Unfortunately, under state law, one charter amendment, or each charter amendment may address only one subject matter. And so I generally interpret that to mean if we're touching one section, we should do one charter amendment for that section, and we shouldn't try and combine multiple sections into one amendment, because it could be deemed separate subject matter.
Okay.
Because the state wants to make it easy for the residents to petition something to referendum and not have to piecemeal an amendment if there's only one thing that they object to.
Okay. All right. So we're giving up on some of the general cleanup, or do you feel like we've accomplished what we need to accomplish here?
Well, yeah, so some of the general cleanup, as you noted, was the consultant recommended don't use the village and Martin's Additions, pick one and use it everywhere. That we haven't tried to do. Another one was every time a number is used, express it as a numeral in parentheses in addition to spelling it out. So I did do that in every section that we're editing.
Yeah.
But we're not doing an amendment specially for that purpose if we had nothing else to edit in a section.
So I'll go back through the list and the recommendation from the consultant came in. I would say if you guys have a spare moment too and something that comes to your attention,
And
might as well do it now instead of leaving it for somebody else.
there was a table.
Yes, the
The council said, we want this.
I believe it's in meeting minutes somewhere.
About 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I did my work based on that table, what I understood.
The decisions have been made
The
on the
council
table.
said, amend
Got it.
406.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
My
Ron.
pleasure.
So, discussion on charter amendment recommendations, but we're not, do we want to introduce? Do we want to wait for Ron to do some of the cleanup that was?
This should all be introduced as one package, correct?
Doesn't have to be, but I think that makes sense,
Yeah.
so nothing
And,
falls through the cracks.
Okay.
So since we have, no, because it's only 4 weeks, it's 28 days. So if we don't introduce tonight, we don't.
I know the elections committee was hoping to have the amendment done before the next election, but
they're not.
But it's going to be so close anyway that there's probably no rush. And if we don't introduce until February, it might bump the hearing to April.
Right.
But
let's take our time.
Yeah.
And make sure that if there are any additional...
Well, we'd still have, we'd have the
still
open
have-
process, right? If we introduce tonight, we could take,
But Ron's making changes and making,
yeah, I think you have to tell us whether or not we've made administrative or substantive changes.
Exactly, yeah. I would say don't introduce tonight.
Okay.
Make sure everything is good to go before we introduce.
You get to call Marty and tell her that. Or I will. Let me know what you want to do. Okay? All right. Thank you.
You could just introduce that one, but even if we introduced it now, because of the 30-day delay,
And then
we couldn't
45.
adopt until March, and then it wouldn't become effective until May.
Yeah, after
the window would have
May
already
15th.
started.
Yeah,
Right.
so
After the
it's too
election.
late anyway.
Too late, yeah.
Okay. So let's make sure that we actually do talk to Marty about that so that she can let her folks know, not a lack of desire, logistically not going to work out. But their end goal, hopefully we will accomplish. All right, so the plan is...
And we still have a means to preclude anonymous nominations.
well, it requires nominations by a resident, and you don't know somebody's a resident.
Right, exactly. So
If you
that's
don't know who they are.
that's what you could rely on if you really want to.
So we'll actually introduce, so this was just a discussion on the chart. We will introduce them, the goal is at the next meeting.
All right.
Okay? All right. Matt, manager's report.
All right. So the village collected holiday fund checks from village residents and distributed to waste management workers, and it was right around the same amount as last year, so just under $10,000. So thank you to the residents, especially thank you on behalf of the workers from Waste Management, who are very grateful for the village's generosity. So thank you to the residents who were able to contribute. Office redesign. We ordered these chairs and the table a few months ago, and we made the second and final order for the new office furniture.
But can I ask a question about that? There's no bills for that.
Not yet.
We haven't paid any money for this stuff yet. Is that
That's
right?
right. Right. That's right.
Oh, okay. I was wondering whether you got them off the back of a truck or what.
We placed the order with them in part because there was an increase in price that would have gone into effect if we waited. So the check is coming, but haven't signed it yet. But that being said, in order to do some of the things that we had talked about, like moving the door, it required not just logistical, a lot more than we were anticipating in terms of acquiring permits and the electricity that would be, the rewiring that would be required for putting in the additional outlets that would be needed. And then on top of that, the amount of money that would cost puts us over what we've budgeted for it. So it was my recommendation to hold off on that for now, in terms of making the office look more professional and nice. I thought a new coat of paint and and shampoo the carpets would go a long way, and it wouldn't be necessary to go through this more rigorous process.
How are you guys, desks, that one was breaking, I mean, I want to make sure that...
together with duct tape.
Okay, so let's not hold it together with duct tape forever.
Right. So that's why. So we have the new furniture coming in. Okay. The stuff that's needed is coming in. Okay. And then if we want to look at reorienting and going that extra step, then we can do that sort of piecemeal moving forward.
Okay. Right.
We have begun working on an updated directory. We have every 2 years the village puts out a new directory. So we created a new resident contact form that's available online. I'll send out again periodically emails giving people links to it, and the street captains as well volunteered to pass them out door to door. So we're trying to get as many people as we can to get as much up-to-date information, because even going back to the 2016 directory, there's a handful of people that were long gone. That's still kind of slipped through the cracks there.
Can we make sure that we add that to the next newsletter, the actual form or link to the form? And then for anybody that receives the newsletter via mail, that we actually also mail them that form.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this may affect the charter amendment. Was 701. I was looking into at the recommendation of Dan Baden, a way to streamline bill paying, and he was looking into a site called bill.com that the town of Chevy Chase has actually adopted it for its bill signing process, and it would essentially work the same sort of way, but instead of what now we get the check, we send it to Dan issues a check, sends it to us, we get 2 signatures, then send it out. We would still receive the check, receive the bill, send it to Dan, who would issue a check electronically, and then it would go out to or whatever council members are needed to sign off on it, who would approve the bill, and then Dan
approve it digitally.
Yeah.
From the comfort of your home.
Would we see the bill and the check?
The invoice.
Yes.
The invoice and the check?
Yep. And so then once those are approved, Dan would then get permission through this software to then be able to issue the check, and that sends it out on its own. So we also wouldn't have to worry about postage and physically going to the post office, things like that.
So is it the same workflow, just digitally?
Yeah.
It's essentially the exact same workflow, just digitally. But the one difference would be you would be signing off on the bills as simultaneously with the check versus getting the bill, sending over the check, then signing it. If that makes sense, sort of.
Do you know how long the Village of Chevy Chase has been using, or Town of Chevy Chase?
Yeah, they only started a few months ago, but it comes highly recommended from them as well. I spoke to Todd, who's the manager there. He said it's great. It really has streamlined, made it more efficient. It also works seamlessly with QuickBooks, so that system integrates everything that's input there automatically gets input into QuickBooks as well.
It also speeds up the process.
Do they have the same rules on 2 council members having to sign? Because that's a logistical question. You know, if it's like some buckshot email to all of us,
right?
Then that could get a little hectic.
Yeah.
I mean, can't we just? I still don't understand, and this is probably SunTrust should be able to do 2 electronic signatures on a check for us. So
we had asked initially if we could do this via SunTrust, like online bill pay, like you would do from your own home. It doesn't reconcile with QuickBooks. So with this particular software, the council members would get a copy of the invoice. There's evidently like a button you click to say approve. You get the 2 signatures approving the invoice. That tells Dan that it's okay to go ahead and generate a check. And then because of this particular software, again, it all is reconciled with QuickBooks.
And the only way Dan would end up with the invoice would be if the manager sent it.
We still have to send it to him.
Yeah, and this wasn't necessarily to say, can we start this tomorrow? This was just throwing it out there. I have a tutorial video that I can also circulate if it's something that you are interested, or if you feel like it's not.
What's the monthly subscription fee?
I think Dan said it would cost about $500 for the year.
For the year.
We probably pay that in postage back and forth.
Plus the mail that gets stolen.
Yeah, I was going to say, to Dan back and forth.
Efficient, because our bill paying right now, it just takes too long.
I think it still would charge us sort of like a stamps.com still charges you per thing you send out. So we still would be paying postage. So I don't know that it would be a huge
Why would you be paying postage if you're not sending anyway?
If you're
because they are actually sending out physical checks still.
So we're not really.
Well, but we're not sending anything to Dan.
Time, cost.
We've been faxing. I don't know.
And then you don't have to come to the office
we
to sign.
scan
Do it from the company.
and then every month we send the physical bills as well. So I'll circulate that information so it's just some food for thought.
Okay.
Just the new website is live. Most people have probably seen it. There might still be some kinks or things that got transferred over that aren't up to date. So just wanted to pass along if anything seems missing or is not up to date, let our office know and we can fix it ASAP.
They're responsive and.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's actually a really intuitive system too. So I've only had to call them one time, and they were really quickly able to resolve whatever issue it was that I had.
Okay.
Do they have any recommendations on software fixes for the recordings?
So the website is not the problem. The website, I'm able to upload it. It's actually, we had a software program called Movie Maker that got taken off. So I can play it and listen to it on Windows Media Player. Mm-hmm. But I don't have a way to upload it onto YouTube. Basically.
So if this is outdated and there's an easier way for us to do this going forward, let us know. Because I don't want you to spend a lot of time trying to solve a problem that shouldn't be that big of a problem.
Okay.
I think also as we're discussing the bill paying system, as you look into the cost of it, it would be helpful to know like how many hours you actually spend on this and what what will be the savings.
Okay.
And the risk of mailing Dan things back and forth. I think that's a good thing for folks to know.
Okay, great. The GIS contract seems to be dragging on at this point. We have two proposals that we are considering. They're both over the amount that we've budgeted. One of them is closer. One of them is way over, and more than what we initially spent on the GIS system. 10 15 years ago, 12 years ago, whenever it was actually first implemented. So I kind of wanted to go back to them and say, reconcile what's going on there, why it would, because we're giving them more information now, they're not starting from scratch. But my hope is that once that gets sorted out, Doug's looking it over as well, and hopefully I can send it out and have a recommendation out to you by the end of the month on somebody to select for that.
Great. So we talked about this in the past. Just again, not interested in just spending a bunch of money for no reason. If they give you a great reason as to why, whoever it is, and you guys say, this is going to help us do our job, this is the best thing, then we want to hear that. If you say it's not worth it,
right, right, yeah. They have a good reputation, and they'd be a great company to work with, I think. But that's what I'm not sure about, is why the cost is so high. Is there a specific reason, or then the other, I've received a couple of proposals for these welcome to the village signs. That initial company, the more I was looking at it and the more I've tried to talk to them, I just think it was cheesy and he didn't seem all that interested in it. So I've contacted about 5 companies.
You don't want that person.
Yeah, I don't think that they didn't seem that gung-ho about it. So there's a couple of different companies that have given us a few proposals on pricing at least and materials. A couple of them have suggested high-density urethane, which is like a
Trex,
but with a carved finish, so it would weather better and last longer.
Are we trying to replicate the wood sign?
Well, that's the question. If you don't like wood, you would prefer
just weathered
wood-like. What about wood-like?
Well, but wood-like. So if it looks like it, but it's not something that's going to have to be repainted.
But we're going to be a tree town.
There it is.
That's right.
Yeah, but you can still be a tree town with
composite material.
Yeah.
So that is
Well, that looks
so
like a
basically
fun-
the 3 options we would have at this point are a plywood sign,
Which is what we have now, right?
yes, high density urethane, or just doing a printed flat sign. So those are sort of the 3 options. The printed flat sign would be the cheapest. The high density urethane would be the most expensive, would probably last the longest.
And aesthetically be the most pleasing to me.
I guess I was, yes. I think maybe if we get...
Unless I see like some kind of a...
I
get
can
what you're
maybe
saying.
narrow it down and give you some idea of what we're actually debating between.
Thank you.
Right.
The Montgomery County master plans, so due to feedback, the reclassification of Brookville Road was removed as a recommendation and is no longer included in the plan. So
Congratulations.
we won on that one.
Yay.
In terms of the county's bike plan, the county has sent over a new plan. It's an old plan. But they want to incorporate Cummings Lane and Brookville as part of its biking master plan. I invited them over to talk about it, to figure out what exactly that means, and I left still not entirely understanding what that means, other than that they may ask us to put up a sign that says "careful of bikers," essentially.
Okay.
It's not like there's any extra space and there's still lots of
I was going
traffic.
to say, on Brookville, that doesn't make any sense.
I don't really understand it. I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to... I certainly, at the end of that meeting, felt like...
We were like, huh? Are you kidding us? You're going to put a bike lane on this road? There's no room.
Have we documented our confusion as to why they think there's room for a bike lane on Brookville?
They're not going to put a bike lane. That's the thing. It's
in the middle.
It
It's
has
like a picture of
it
a
has nothing
bicycle.
to do with bike lanes. They're not making more space for bikes. They are just
designating,
including it as part of what they consider bikeable areas.
A bicycle could theoretically go like in the middle of the street.
Right.
They don't have to be along the side. They could be in the middle of the street, which could theoretically block up traffic way back.
But following supposedly
traffic laws.
Yes. Well, that's it, and nothing precludes anybody from biking on Brookville Road as is. So, yeah. Sort of touched on this. WSSC has finally selected a contractor, so they are holding a public information meeting on Wednesday, January 31st. At the Chevy Chase Elementary School. So I was planning to attend that meeting, and residents are also invited to attend, everybody in the community. The affected roads will be Quincy, about half of Raymond, Chestnut, the intersection of Chestnut and Taylor, and then a good portion of Thornapple Street as well. So, as we said, those are the streets that were conspicuously not repaved. So that's the reason for this. So the quicker they can get in and finish, the quicker we can then repave these streets that are in dire need of repaving. Joe Cutro did village-wide sign inventory. He estimates that it'll cost about $7,000 to $8,000. That is within our budget. However, I've received a couple of emails from residents on Quincy Street complaining about cut-through traffic and asking if we would entertain a traffic study on their street to get a count for cars and potentially add a speed bump. And talking to Joe, obviously we don't have that data yet, but he said that it might be a good idea to gather that data, and he basically agreed that yes, people are probably cutting through Quincy Street.
Have we not done a traffic study on Quincy
No, we haven't
before?
done it in years. If ever, I don't know.
I think that we did one. I mean, I'm not suggesting we don't do it again, but
there's not an up-to-date, there's not one that we've done in the last at least
like 10 years.
Yeah, since 2010 maybe, on Quincy Street.
Maybe it was just a discussion of the road hump. Okay, go ahead.
So then I guess the last thing is just more of the same at this intersection of Taylor and Brookville. So they are saying spring of this year they are going to do this redesign that's been in the works since Gene was here. So
it just goes on.
Yeah, they showed up. Yeah, they showed up and
it was getting started.
We're
last
gung ho,
year.
but then they realized that there was some ponding across the street, so then they wanted to incorporate that into the redesign. So then they went back to the drawing board a little bit, but supposedly this spring, that's when it's going to happen. So the substantive changes will be all of the stop signs will be a little bit closer together. The crosswalks themselves will be a little bit shorter distance, and straighter lines.
You know, another issue that comes up in that crossing is crossing guards. You know, the Montgomery County pays for crossing guards on Connecticut Avenue to go to the elementary school twice a day when they're coming and going. And I stopped and asked them.
Quite a harrowing street to cross.
That's right. And I asked, who pays your salary? And they said the county does. And it's something we might propose and get the neighboring jurisdictions to go along.
Yeah. Okay. I'll follow up with whoever I need to follow up with about that.
And they're good. They're trained. They control things.
And the other weird thing is the one handicap spot that's after the stop sign. So we've already spoken about moving that either to the side or right in the back there, because that's it limits drivers' vantage point. So hopefully that'll keep moving forward. This bulk pickup on Saturday, and the next one will be in March, and that's all I got.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have anything else for that, Tina? No? Okay, so back open for resident comments. Yes, Frank.
I'm glad I attended the meeting because I certainly found reason to ask a couple more questions. I'm glad that it is intended to have a public hearing on these charter amendments. I think there are a couple of, if I may say so, quite explosive issues in there. I think they need to be ventilated, and I think they need to be discussed and understood. I'm not talking about the check cashing authority. I'm particularly concerned about Section 602 in this election stuff. So I'll just make that as an observation.
So what's the explosive part?
The election part.
The elections part, I think, is the one I've paid some attention to, and I think there are some real issues in there that I would very much like to see understood and discussed. I'm also very, very concerned about the question of the idea of domicile being introduced into this. I think it runs totally contrary to a policy that this village has very honorably maintained, which is to let non-U.S. citizens living here to vote. In addition to that, we are living outside of the nation's capital with a fair number of transient people who come here, who may rent or may otherwise not be here, and who would very much like to, and very often do, contribute to the well-being of this village and work at it. And I would hate to see the question of domicile start screwing that one up. The more serious stuff to the side, I would appreciate it. I'm afraid I couldn't understand Ms. Langley when she said that they had a new member of the elections committee. Would it be possible to publicize the names of these committees maybe in the next newsletter? So that people know. The elections committee, once again, is the one I find of most interest to me because the election's coming up in May.
I'm sorry. I just want to get clarification. I just want to get clarification. Did you want the names of the election committee members, or?
Well, not just elections committee, but our different committees,
Sure.
elections, ethics, and whatnot.
Just a list of the.
In a convenient place for people to know and to see, and how to get in touch with them if necessary.
Okay, great, thank you.
So maybe just as a reminder in the newsletter, there's a committee section. There's all the committees, here are the members, and then their stuff.
They are posted on the website as well, aren't they?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah.
Couple of rather simple questions. Matt, you probably can answer them right off the top of your head. How many households participated in providing to the holiday fund? I'm kind of curious. You said $10,000. No.
Let me think. So I think we had about a little under 200 people gave.
Which is very good.
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
And how many have replied so far to your request to be able to put out a new directory?
We got a really good response right off the bat, and now it's started to taper off. So we're probably due for another reminder, and also to make sure that we're not missing people that don't see the constant contact.
Can I ask a question? If there are no changes, is there any reason to
Yes.
submit a form?
Yes.
They asked us
Why?
to do
I
that.
specifically
to confirm
want
it.
people's email addresses and cell phones. The way the system works here is we have constant contact where we email people. There have been a number of residents who are not on there or their emails changed. If you don't get on constant contact, we have our email through Gmail. Matt has an account, I have an account. They are not synced. So he could have email addresses in his contact list that I don't have or vice versa. I want everything, I want as much information as possible about residents. Doesn't mean it's going to be published to residents, it means it's for the office. It's been extremely helpful because I'm getting a lot of information that we didn't have. There've been a lot of changes. Now, I've not noticed any like misspellings or anything like that, but it helps us to attain, and it also confirms that the information in there is correct or has changed. Some people don't have landlines anymore. They only have cell phones. Okay, whose cell phone is it? Is it, resident number 1? Is it resident number 2? We didn't know that before. Now people are specifically saying it's, Bob's cell phone or it's Jane's cell phone, so we know.
And we'll be able to publish that online as well as the paper.
Yeah, we are able to do that. The website has the capability to do that.
Okay.
We'll have to make logins, so people get logins and then they get assigned certain permissions to change or edit, their information or just to view it. But yes.
Sorry, Frank.
I was going to say, my hope is that depending on what the council chooses, this won't be a 2-year project anymore.
Yeah.
With technology, as soon as I know a resident is moving in or moving out, I'm changing that directory immediately. I'm putting on the directory the, update and then the date. So theoretically, the directory is going to get mailed out or it's going to get published. There's no reason that 2 months from then or 6 months from then, we can't upload it on the website. It'll be current as of that moment. If a resident needs it in writing, we can print it out or they could print it out. So it should be a continuously updated document.
Good, okay.
Do you have a target date for publishing the new directory?
I think in the past we've done it around, at least I think the 2016 one went out around March, so I think that's what we'll be aiming for.
I would like to get everybody's information by the end of January. I don't know if that's realistic or not.
If I may make a suggestion just to make it so obvious that if you've lived here for a long time, you still should fill this out. Because somehow
I've gotten a few emails saying, do I still need to fill it out? And I'm like, yes.
Well, that was my question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing's changed,
I want
why
a piece of
fill it
paper
out?
on everybody.
Professor, the directions stay safe. Fill it out.
I know.
My suggestion is that in addition to using these electronic means of getting in touch with people who respond to electronic means, you take advantage of the attitude expressed by our postmaster and tell them that there's a sensitive mailing coming through and get in touch with people who have not replied or houses that have not replied by mail with some kind of a provision for a return.
We're actually trying to use our floor captains to help us save some money on postage and to get the word out.
Thing that all they have to do is fill out, put in their mailbox so that the guy will pick it up and get it into you.
Okay.
If you're trying to do this by March and if you want to complete this. Now, I don't know to what extent this elections committee uses this as a primary resource or not. I have no idea what they do and how they do it. But this is very, very important document.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, if I may make that modest proposal.
Much appreciated.
You were talking about making the office more nice. Why don't you put in one of those coffee machines with a little sip?
Oh yeah, one of the Keurig, the one cup. Yeah. I'm not a coffee drinker.
And then finally, I had an email from one of our most illustrious former citizens, Steve Schmal, who I'm sure would have enjoyed this meeting this evening. And he wanted to know what was new. I'm not the right person to tell him very much, but would it be possible to maybe send him the newsletters in the future?
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
I don't have his address, I have his email address. And you might ask him, if he'd like it by email, but I'm sure he'd appreciate it very much.
Yes, absolutely.
Frank, I was just thinking about him today, because he always asked for better interest rates on our money. And I checked it today, it's 1.37%. When he was asking, it was 0.2. So tell him we're earning money, earning some interest on the funds.
Almost half of inflation.
If you tell him that, that'll make his day.
Okay.
But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Well, and that's a lot better than a lot of people are getting.
Well, that's the
Gene or
MML,
Keith?
the Maryland Municipal.
I have a question that relates back to the discussion of the charter, and it's predominantly, I guess, for Ron. I'm glad that we're going to have a public hearing and that you'll be putting out enough information so that people can really make a comment. But Ron, how do you determine what belongs in a charter versus what belongs in the code? And I'm raising that question. I might have a general idea of what the difference between the documents are, but I'm raising it specifically in reference to the identification as students in the charter. Why students? Why not other categories that are protected? I find that very troubling. Or then the issue of domicile comes up too. I think related to that, I don't know whether the council has thought about moving to using Montgomery County's voter registration rolls and requiring people to be registered in Montgomery County in order to have that you need to have the conversation in order to vote in a village election. Now, Garrett Park does it so that they create their own separate role for people that are non-citizens, because they allow non-citizens to vote like we do. But obviously a non-citizen's not going to be on your voter roll. And they manage it, and so if you wanted to go and find some more information, that's a good place to go. But so the question of why not whatever we wanted to do at a particular time with regard to who's a special category, why would that belong in the charter and not? You don't have to answer that tonight, but I think this is the kind of stuff that ought to be talked about. And then similarly, in section 602, the discussion that this two things, well, one specifically about what I'm talking about, this anonymous nominations. I don't know what an anonymous nomination is, but I don't know why. My question is, why would it be in the charter if it means that all nominations have to be signed by a resident voter in Martin's Additions? Then you just put that. You just put it isn't a constitutional thing. You just put that in your procedures. You know, all nominations must be signed by a qualified voter from the resident of the Village of Martin's Additions, and the signature must be provided. That doesn't belong. It strikes me in the charter, and it goes back to the question I asked: why would it be there? Separate from that, I have some issues about how we would maintain the council's authority with regard to the elections. There's some discussion here about giving the election officials more oversight. I wasn't exactly sure, but should elected officials should the election committee, should those people be required to take an oath of office if they're handling so much of an important matter as election nominations? Or in other words, are you taking out of the hands of the council authority that really still belongs in the council's hands? And you got to make sure that the people that you're giving the authority to, a committee, is bonded, taken an oath of office, knows what they should do with the records. Anyway, those are probably things that we can bring up at a public hearing.
I think, Ron, refresh my memory on this. I can't remember whether it's the charter or the ordinance that specifies that there will be an election committee, and it says who will propose procedures that will be approved by the council. And we have finally, after ignoring that for 20 years, finally adopted that. So I think the council does come in to approve the procedures. And we've had discussion. When the first time this happened, there were some pretty serious discussions of what those procedures were. So that's the way the council does get in. But I don't recall whether...
That's in the charter.
That is in the charter, that the...
Section 602,
yeah,
which says all elections shall be managed by an election committee. And your exact phrase is, the committee shall operate according to rules and procedures adopted by the council.
Yeah, adopted by the council. That's where the council gets in.
Okay.
Yeah.
But these are the kind of issues I would imagine people might want to raise, and you want to be sure that there's some consistency. You mentioned consistency. I think that's important. What are we doing talking about students in our charter?
Right, yeah.
About anonymous nominations when you could just define it very simply out of the way.
Yeah, I think that's...
Excuse me, because once again, I had a problem following the discussion.
Uh-oh, I'm sorry.
You're going to...
my voice?
You're going to have this public hearing in connection with the February meeting, is that right?
No, the introduction would be in February.
The formal introduction. This was an informal introduction.
This was a discussion. As on the agenda, it was just a discussion.
So it's going to be something's going to be formally introduced.
Probably in February, and
then
probably a hearing in March.
Now,
or April.
April.
The public discussion would be
April, probably.
After it being introduced in February.
Correct.
I mean, you can comment at any time in that period.
Does that leave any room for possible modifications?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if such modifications take place, then what? Does the calendar once again start at day number 1?
It depends on how significant the changes are. If we think that they're so significant that we want to give the public another 30 days to comment, then we would have another hearing. But if it's changing, 5 to 4, probably not. We would make that change at the hearing.
But if there were a significant substantive change, basically the clock would start running again.
Can you give us an example of what would be a substantive change? Removing anonymous nominations, is that it? No. So if you put that in a regulation, that's not considered.
Right, yeah.
And if somebody wants to introduce something
brand new,
yeah. How's that handled?
Yeah, if it's a substantive. Hey, you haven't made any edits to section 7012.
Does it start again?
Then we'd start the clock over.
I would think that this question of domicile versus resident versus who lives in the village would be a very important substance.
Well, based on tonight's discussion, and I think the council has indicated they don't want to see a proposal with domicile in it.
I think you have to look at Mike's concerns and how to address them.
Well, I'm channeling Mike Zielinski.
That's a good person to check.
I've been doing it all night, and I think I've come up with one or two.
He's still with us.
Well, not channeling, telepathically communicating.
All right, Keith, anything? Gene, I'm sorry, are we done? No.
I move that the meeting be adjourned.
But before we do that, seriously, sitting here thinking about what Mike Zielinski might have...
Why don't you give him a call?
Might have thought. And yeah, sure, happy to do that. On the issue of check signing,
yes.
Does the council want to require at least 2 signatures?
Yes.
Okay. And then after listening to Matt, and to answer your question earlier, why did I put in that other phrase? Because I was trying to anticipate future forms of payment. But thinking now tonight, the better way to go, maybe to do nothing on that issue. Because as the charter is currently written, it says in the duties, the chairman shall countersign checks that the treasurer prepares. And if the treasurer is not available, the council can temporarily designate someone else. So
But that's not accurate at all anyway.
Well, the consultant recommended you ought to have an affirmative statement saying there shall be 2 signatures. But reading this again, it's there. It says the
that's not
council
actually
shall
what
countersign.
happens.
Well,
Could we have,
well,
like,
I guess what do you want to happen?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, what do you want to happen?
If we do go to this bill pay, and if it's electronic, would 2 signatures have to be changed to 2 approvals? Would the
digital signature?
No, because that wouldn't be a check. So that requirement only applies to a checks. And so that's a great question. 'Cause another reason why I thought maybe we just leave it alone, because currently it only applies to checks. And it's impossible to legislate or amend the
here's
charter to anticipate every future form of payment.
Correct me if I'm wrong, this is what we want 2 council members to have to sign.
Right.
Physical checks.
Preferably treasurer, but not necessarily.
Yeah, if it's physical
If
checks, if it's if SunTrust figures out how to way to do it electronically, 2 council members have to approve and or sign whatever's the appropriate verb at that time. The method of payment, if it's a check or something else. But I don't think, I like the treasurer for accountability purposes.
Yeah.
I just think that's Professor Travels here.
But we could have a blanket authorization in the first meeting of the year.
Right. Yeah.
That every member is authorized to sign in the absence of the chairman,
You could just be a lawyer
chairperson, and the
and fix it.
treasurer.
Yeah. No,
If you're retired, then you are the docket first.
So I mean, if everyone were authorized formally, then.
Does anybody disagree with what I'm saying? We all think that all the council members should be authorized to sign.
Well,
it means that there has to be 2 of us.
Yes.
After that, it's kind of a
There's no
semantics.
You're not worried.
fixing.
I mean, that we should about just 2 council members going rogue and going over.
Right.
the treasurer's head.
No, I think there should be a priority.
One other thing to think about. There's another sentence in the charter.
Sweet,
The treasurer
Matt has
shall
figured out how to do this.
keep accurate records of all financial transactions. So you may want to retain the requirement that the treasurer should sign.
Yeah, I think there's a priority
Keeping the
signers.
accurate records is different though than signing.
No, but there should be, I think, well, I don't have a strong reason, priority signers. In the absence of the priority signers, other council members are authorized to sign in their absence.
Well, would priority signers be?
As stated in the charter, the chair and the treasurer.
So the charter currently says it's the chair and treasurer, but if anyone's absent, the council can authorize someone else to temporarily countersign.
But we could have a
For
permanent
either
authorization.
chair or treasurer.
We can have a permanent temporary authorization.
Do you have enough direction to come up with
I think
maybe
it's time
2
to go
options
into
if we
closed
require
session.
2 options. Go for it.
Okay.
Anything else? Hearing nothing, we adjourn.
Okay. Oh,
I moved to
the
adjourn.
gavel hits.
Whatever.
Turn it off.
Second. Move to adjourn.
Second.
Oh, move to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.